This week on Breaking Bad, Andre Agassi's book isn't quite the legendary drug drama, but there's still references to weed, speed, and would you believe it, crystal meth. Despite his dalliance with drugs and his tangled relationship with the sport, Agassi cooked up a storm in tennis, winning 8 Grand Slams. His book open reveals his dark secret and uncovers the torture of his past. It also tells of how he essentially got off scot-free after taking crystal meth. As such, Open stands out as one of the most unflinching, arresting sport biographies of all time. In this video, I'll discuss the main themes in Open and tell you my honest thoughts on it. In 1997, Agassi reaches his nadir when he does crystal meth with a friend that we only know as Slim. At the time, Agassi's marriage to Brooke Shields is falling apart. He's untrained and overweight, and the press describe him as washed up and finished. Still, the Americans say the crystal meth washed away every negative thought he's ever had. He adds, "I've never felt so hopeful." The incident occurs when Agassi and Slim are relaxing in Agassi's bachelor pad. So basically, Slim just turns around and says, "Want to get high?" And Agassi just says, "Yeah, why not?" Seems like a funny thing for an athlete to do, but there you go. Agassi experiences what he describes as a vast wave of euphoria. He gets an energy boost and cleans his house top to bottom for 2 days straight without sleeping. This was just one of the wildest, most unforgettable scenes in the book, and you can just see Agassi spiraling out of control. And you think, what makes a rich and successful athlete do this kind of thing? He must have just been at absolute rock bottom. Although there was the potential for a 3-month ban, Agassi tells the ATP a big old fib, explaining that one of his friends spikes his own drinks with crystal meth, and that is how the drug got into his system. Agassi avoids punishment, dodges a bullet, and vows to turn over a new leaf. It's as if Jesse and Walt from Breaking Bad are following Agassi, as earlier in the book, when he's just a fledgling junior, his dad actually offers him speed. I mean, how would that work? I don't know how that would be performance enhancing. And due to his father's overbearing influence, Agassi has to at least look like he takes the speed. In the end, he doesn't. He plays bad on purpose, so the dad would never offer him speed again. In fact, Andre's dad, Mike, rules his son with tyrannical might. He carries a rifle with him, he keeps an axe handle in his car, and when Mike was a kid, he was also trained as a professional boxer by the great Tony Zale. Andre does a great job of depicting Mike as just this scowling, foreboding, larger-than-life character. It's unsettling how far Mike will push Agassi. Mike threw every fibre of his being into making sure that his child prodigy would become an adult champion. When Agassi was a youngster, still dwarfed by the racket he was holding, Mike would yell at him, "Hit harder, hit earlier." As such, Andre grew to despise tennis. Mike told Agassi to use his opponent's strengths against them. He told his son to put a blister on their brains. One of the great things about this book is how the mental side of the game is studied, and I really like how the book amps up that one-on-one side of tennis. It's almost gladiatorial. Although I didn't like Mike's approach to coaching, I did really like how he thought about tennis. So although Agassi is an icon of tennis and a former world #1, he says he was tortured by tennis and the pressure to win. It reminded me of the cyclist Victoria Pendleton, who wrote in her book Between the Lines about the pressure to succeed in triumph. And I've also reviewed that book too, so I will put a link to that in the description of this video. Agassi describes his hatred of tennis as a dark and secret passion. Despite his contempt, he is still successful, but the trouble is, he states, winning doesn't feel as good as losing feels bad. There are times when he wants to lose, like at the US Open in 1991, and against Michael Chang in 1996. He describes the process of losing on purpose as like hitting a wall. At his least motivated, he'll happily accept fines for skipping press conferences. He also smoked weed as a youngster at Nick Bollettieri's academy, and when he was older and a professional, he would regularly just gorge on burgers and alcohol. Also, you wonder where he got his burgers from. It's interesting because a lot of the things which made Agassi so popular, such as his crazy dress sense and the eccentric things he did, were actually almost a middle finger to tennis in its prim and proper conventions. Still, the fans and the media painted him as a gifted maverick, and for that, he just became a star. And going back to the idea of how low Agassi would feel after defeats, after certain losses, he would also set fire to his possessions. Without thinking, I begin setting things on fire, he writes. Paper, clothes, shoes, it's just one of the ways I cope with extreme stress, he continues. And I see this almost as a metaphor for how Agassi would just sometimes completely self-destruct and hand his opponent the victory. It shows how low his confidence was, and also his inability perhaps, or maybe even lack of want to talk about his feelings. Agassi writes in such a vulnerable manner in these kinds of passages. You feel it must have been quite cathartic for him to be so candid and just to put everything on the page. There's something quite poetic about Agassi making his own bonfire, and ironically enough, like quite a few other sportsmen such as Alexander Usyk, Agassi says he is also a fan of poetry, and this is just the archetypal sports expose, warts and all, whether it's reflections on fame, image, identity. This book really has it all. It's also quite a funny book at times. There's a great story about Agassi's coach, Brad Gilbert. When a waiter in Rome tells Brad that they don't serve Bud Ice, he actually leaves the restaurant, comes back with Bud Ice, and demands that they put it in a bucket of ice for him. There's another wild story about Agassi's weave falling out of his hair before one of his matches. As he started balding early, he would wear weaves and wigs during his matches to cover this up. This seems like the most unexpected wardrobe malfunctions, so although male pattern baldness is such a big issue, you wonder how many tennis players have had this happen to them before a match. So for all Agassi gave the sport, I'm quite conflicted in how I think about him now. Tennis handed him riches, adoration, and a family when he married the tennis player Steffi Graf, but it also took away his identity, his zest for life, and also his autonomy. And I have to credit J.R. Moehringer, who ghostwrote the book. I can't imagine how interesting some of their conversations must have been. The development of characters such as Agassi's first wife, Brooke Shields, his coach Brad Gilbert, and his strength and conditioning trainer Jill Reyes, they all feel so just authentic and natural. He also paints Mike Agassi as unflinching and the tennis dad from hell. There's also some really interesting running feuds which go through the book with some of his rivals such as Jim Courier, Jeff Tarango, and Michael Chang. For everything I've just mentioned, Open still stands as one of the greatest sports books of all time, almost 2 decades after it was first released. It shows the Herculean mental strength required to succeed in tennis, and also shows the immense pressure which parents can put on their children. Still, as shown by his flirting with various substances, he did find a way to let loose occasionally. So with that, thank you as always for watching, and see you again soon.